November 30, 2024. A fishing boat drifts helplessly 18 kilometers off the Queensland coast. Inside the vessel are 51 tightly wrapped bales containing 2,340 kilograms of cocaine. The estimated street value is 760 million Australian dollars. The engine has failed. The crew is stranded. What they do not realize is that the Australian Federal Police have been tracking their every movement for months. This is not just the largest cocaine seizure in Australian history. It is the dramatic climax of a covert investigation known as Operation Tyrrendor. And it is about to deliver a major blow to one of the country's most powerful outlaw motorcycle gangs, the Comancheros. For decades, the Comancheros Motorcycle Club has been a dominant force in Australia's criminal underworld. Their name carries weight in prisons, on the streets, and within law enforcement circles. What began as a motorcycle club evolved into a sophisticated criminal enterprise involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, extortion, firearms distribution, and violent enforcement. By 2024, authorities considered them among the most dangerous organized crime groups operating in Australia. To understand the significance of Operation Tyrrendor, it is necessary to understand who the Comancheros are and how they built their power. The club was founded in 1968 in Sydney by Scottish immigrant William George "Jock" Ross. Initially, it was a small group of bikers who felt excluded from other established motorcycle clubs. Over time, however, the group developed a reputation for violence and territorial control. Internal conflicts and gang wars in the 1980s cemented their notoriety, and as the decades passed, the organization adapted to the changing landscape of global organized crime. By the 2000s and 2010s, outlaw motorcycle gangs across Australia had shifted from localized turf battles to transnational criminal operations. The Comancheros were at the forefront of this transformation. Their structure resembled a corporate hierarchy. At the top were national leaders and chapter presidents making strategic decisions. Below them were enforcers, sergeants-at-arms, and prospects working their way up the ranks. This structure insulated senior leadership from direct exposure, while allowing operations to continue even when lower-level members were arrested. One of their most profitable ventures was cocaine importation. Australia represents one of the most lucrative cocaine markets in the world. The country's geographic isolation creates a high-risk smuggling environment, but that same risk produces enormous rewards. A kilogram of cocaine that might cost under $2,000 to produce in Colombia can sell for up to $300,000 in Australia once it reaches street level. The profit margins are extraordinary, often exceeding those in North America or Europe. These margins attract powerful international players. South American cartels produce the cocaine. Mexican organizations facilitate global logistics. Asian syndicates assist with shipping routes and money laundering. Australian groups like the Comancheros act as domestic distributors, ensuring the drugs reach cities and regional centers across the country. The method used in November 2024 was known as the mother-ship-daughter ship strategy. A large vessel, operating in international waters, carries bulk quantities of cocaine far from the reach of coastal authorities. A smaller vessel departs from Australia, meets the larger ship offshore, transfers the drugs, and then returns to land disguised as a legitimate fishing or recreational craft. It is a complex operation requiring funding, coordination, maritime skill, and trusted contacts on both ends of the route. And in late 2024, it was set in motion. Operation Tyrrendor began not at sea, but in intelligence offices. In early November, the Australian Federal Police received information from international partners that a syndicate linked to the Comancheros was planning to import a massive shipment of cocaine by sea. The AFP, working alongside the Queensland Police Service and the Australian Border Force, launched a joint covert investigation. Surveillance intensified. Financial transactions were analyzed. Communications were monitored. Investigators identified a 35-year-old man in central Queensland who had recently purchased a recreational fishing boat under suspicious financial circumstances. The boat was capable of extended offshore travel. It was not purchased for leisure. Authorities tracked the vessel as it departed Queensland waters and headed into the open ocean. Maritime surveillance tools, including radar systems and aerial assets, monitored its path. Intelligence suggested it was traveling to a prearranged rendezvous point in international waters. At sea, the smaller vessel met the mothership. Over several hours, 51 bales of cocaine were transferred aboard. Each bale was carefully wrapped for waterproof protection, containing approximately 40 kilograms of cocaine divided into 1 kilogram bricks. Once fully loaded, the fishing boat began its return journey toward Queensland. Then disaster struck. On November 30th, approximately 18 kilometers off the northeastern tip of Kagari, formerly known as Fraser Island, the boat's engine failed. The vessel was left drifting in open water with more than 2 tons of cocaine on board. The crew attempted repairs, but the engine would not restart. Hours passed. Each minute increased the risk of detection. What the crew did not know was that the entire operation was already under observation. Law enforcement had been monitoring the vessel's movements and was aware of the cargo. At 7:40 p.m., AFP tactical officers approached the disabled fishing boat. These were specialized maritime units trained for high-risk interdictions. Using rigid inflatable boats launched from a larger patrol vessel, they surrounded the drifting craft and issued commands. 2 men were on board, aged 35 and 57. They were arrested without resistance. Inside the vessel, officers discovered the 51 bales of cocaine. Field testing confirmed the substance. The total weight was 2,340 kilograms. The estimated street value, 760 million Australian dollars. Simultaneously, coordinated arrests were unfolding on shore. At around 7 p.m., before the maritime boarding occurred, 2 men were arrested near a boat ramp close to Bundaberg. They were believed to be part of the shore crew, waiting to receive and transport the drugs inland. Shortly afterward, additional arrests were made in Bundaberg East and other nearby locations. Vehicles were intercepted. Suspects were detained. Communications devices were seized. In Brisbane, approximately 300 kilometers south, police executed a search warrant at a residence in Victoria Point. A 51-year-old man was arrested, suspected of playing a coordinating role in the importation scheme. By the end of the night, 11 men and 2 juveniles had been taken into custody in a tightly synchronized operation. Among those arrested was a senior figure within the Comancheros organization, identified as the vice president of the Brisbane chapter. His arrest confirmed that this was not an independent smuggling attempt by small-time operators. It was a large-scale operation backed by one of Australia's most established outlaw motorcycle gangs. All defendants were charged with conspiracy to import a commercial quantity of border-controlled drugs under Commonwealth law. This offense carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. In conspiracy cases, prosecutors do not need to prove that the drugs were successfully distributed. They must show that there was an agreement to import drugs and that steps were taken to carry out that agreement. The voyage, the rendezvous at sea, and the shore coordination were sufficient evidence. Most of the accused were refused bail due to the seriousness of the charges and the risk of reoffending or failing to appear in court. The seizure had immediate consequences for Australia's cocaine market. Removing 2.34 tons of cocaine from circulation disrupted supply chains. Authorities anticipated short-term price increases and scarcity in Queensland, and possibly nationwide. More importantly, the operation prevented millions of potential street-level transactions that would have fueled addiction and funded further criminal activity. Operation Tyrrendor also exposed vulnerabilities within the Comancheros network. Despite their reputation for secrecy and discipline, law enforcement had infiltrated or monitored the planning stages of the operation. Whether through informants, intercepted communications, or international intelligence sharing, the gang's operational security had been compromised. This does not mean the Comancheros will disappear. Outlaw motorcycle gangs are resilient. Leadership positions are replaced. Networks adapt. New smuggling routes are tested. However, the financial loss is significant. The seized cocaine alone represents hundreds of millions in lost revenue. The cost of vessels, logistics, and legal defense adds further strain. The arrest of a senior member disrupts established relationships with overseas suppliers. A disabled fishing boat drifting off Kagari was not just a maritime mishap. It was the collapse of a criminal enterprise that believed it had mastered the art of moving drugs across oceans undetected. When AFP officers stepped aboard that vessel at 7:40 p.m., they did more than seize cocaine. They delivered a message that even the most powerful criminal organizations are vulnerable when law enforcement agencies coordinate, share intelligence, and act with precision. The waves off Queensland eventually returned to calm. But for the Comancheros, the consequences of that night will echo for years to come.